Welcome to another insightful episode. I'm your host, Patrick Afrifa. Today, we are joined by Brent Norkus from Goosehead Insurance Agency, a top tier insurance broker and risk consultant. Whether you're a new home buyer, a new homeowner, or even a seasoned investor, you won't miss this deep dive into the real world implications of misunderstanding homeowner insurance. Brent will shed light on the most common myths, challenges, and more importantly, how to avoid costly mistakes. Please join me as we talk to Brent. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining my channel today. Today, I have a special topic and a special individual on to discuss one of the most important components when it comes to one buying a home and even owning that home, right? Whether it's for investment or a place that you plan on living, that is home insurance. There is a lot of misconceptions, challenges that come with homeowners insurance, and I personally believe that majority of the people do not have much information or knowledge when it comes to policies. Personally, uh, due to my lack of knowledge, I've had a painful experience when it comes to home owners insurance. So, as I stated earlier, I have a special friend with me today. I have Brent on on the podcast with me. Brent is a friend. He's also an entrepreneur, an avid golfer, and he is, happy to share, his expertise with my fellow investors and individuals that tend to watch my podcast. Welcome to my channel, Brent. First, I can you give me a brief uh, bio about you, what you do on a day to day basis when it comes to home owners insurance.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks for having me here, Patrick. It is sure a pleasure to say the least. Now I know you tackled a couple points there, but I'm going to go dig right into what I do, what I'm about, right? So
Hmm.
as I work for Goosehead Insurance, I'm an independent insurance broker, right? So what that really means to us, and everyone kind of watching this is why would you settle for one option, right? At the end of the day. So with that broker mentality that I have and access to, we're able to shop about 85% of that A-rated insurance market. So when you're talking about looking for home insurance, you know, we're going to look through your progressives nationwide, Allstate, Liberty Mutual, farmer companies, right from top to bottom. Some West Coast carriers like Mercury, if you've ever heard of them. Some companies out of Florida like Stillwater. There's a ton of carriers out of Ohio too that aren't just regional, carriers that do business all over. And Universal Property and Casualty out of Florida. So there's a ton of carriers, that we can take a look at over here instead of just your standard market brick and mortar store insurance agencies, right? So when you're in the process of buying a home, when you're in the process of buying an investment property, really from top to bottom, we're going to be looking at coverages, deductibles, insurance portfolios. What's the best ROI that you can have on your property? Really at the end of the day, it doesn't make sense to overpay for something, that's giving you the same level of coverage. So my day to day, honestly, working with clients, consulting them in and out of the whole home buying experience or insurance buying experience. It doesn't just have to be a new home or, a new investor, right? So that's a little bit more about me, but I'll kind of give it off to you here, Patrick.
Thank you, Brent. And I'm glad you did covered some of the things that I wanted to ask you today. And I guess one of them is understanding our policies, right? So when I purchase a policy, as I stated earlier, many of us just, pay for it and just forget it, hoping that it is going to cover everything, right?
Mm-hmm.
So my first question will be, you know, as many individuals believe that their policies, cover everything. Why is this a misconception?
I think personally, and that's a great question because it happens all the time. Um, the common misconception on home insurance is that it does cover everything, right? So you have your coverages, right? You have your A through F, your main dwelling, other structures, personal property,
Okay.
loss of use, liability, medical payments. You have water
Okay.
coverages. You have all that fun stuff, right? And everyone thinks that, like, as long as you have that $500,000 for your coverage A, you are good no matter what happens to the home, what situation you might be in. But fun thing is, agents don't really do a good job of telling people, and policies don't do a really good job of telling people in that fine print, right? You have to really know the knowledge about insurance to understand this. But Patrick, I want to tell you real quick too, there are 8 common exclusions on a homeowner's insurance policy.
I see.
Have you heard of them before?
No.
No, see, and that's one problem that we have here. So, with that being said, the exclusions on a home policy are normal wear and tear, right? So
Okay.
obviously that one makes sense, right? If the
Right.
roof is old, windows, doors, like that's going to be a trip to Menards, Home Depot, right?
Right.
Now, the next one, kind of subject to states, but rust and mold is a huge one, right? So any
Mm.
kind of rust growth, mold growth, typically that takes time, right, to occur. So if you have pride of ownership, you're taking care of that property, shouldn't really run into that problem. You know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah. And then
Okay.
we have your other ones that get a little goofy, get a little silly. But you have your governmental actions. So if the
Okay.
government decides, to take the home, and it kind of leads in the next two too, right? Which is going to be nuclear warfare is one, and the next
Okay.
one is warfare. So bullets flying, bombs dropping, you're not covered on your home insurance, and that's where kind of that governmental action takes an
Okay.
effect. You know,
Okay.
so those are some exclusions there. On the other end of that too, we have intentional actions, right? So setting the home on fire, punching holes in the wall because your favorite football team, aka the Bears, lose. You might lead you to
Uh-huh.
have a couple of issues and problems there, but no coverage on any intentional actions. And then the last two are the most important
Okay.
misconceptions, right? So we have earthquake and earth
Mm.
movement. So those
Okay.
are both in the same kind of category there. Now, sinkholes, those count, right? The foundation settling, cracking, that's not covered either, right? That's over time, normal wear and tear. And then the last two that I kind of want to hit on real quick would be flood. So that's rising water outside the home, where
Okay.
it builds up outside the home, goes into the basement, right? Or first level, and then water backup. And I
Okay.
would say that water backup is probably the biggest misconception between that flood and water backup coverage, right?
Yeah, I can
Um,
see that.
yeah. So that's where insurance gets kind of dicey, is really in those water coverages,
Okay.
pipe burst, toilet overflowing, that kind of thing. But those are the common misconceptions about home insurance and what you have coverage for and simply what you don't, you know?
Okay. That's really interesting. As an individual who own homes and I has purchased a few of them, I didn't
Yeah.
even know all of this. So thank you for that. So then let's talk about the challenges that come with these misconceptions. And I think we've touched on some of them.
Hmm.
Some of my listeners either own, luxury homes
Hmm.
or just, your everyday regular homes or even investment properties and maybe, not so attractive, neighborhoods and stuff like that. So I believe this challenge, has cut across all property types, right? You know, can you touch on some of the challenges that come with this misconception? I think we've kind of hinted on it, but can you,
Yeah.
tell us some of them?
Yeah, for sure. So, can I kind of start with like geographical location?
Okay,
Would that be okay?
that's fine.
Perfect. We'll start there. So, essentially, we'll talk about Cook County, right?
Okay,
Chicagoland, kind of, in the realm, right? So, it's not whether it's a very aspired area to be in. It's not that really most
Okay.
oftentimes with
I
insurance.
see.
I mean, some carriers do, take a look at that and, crime
Okay.
rating in the area, but really what we're going to be looking at is water. And the problem with
Hmm.
Chicago is the water backup. The city, I've heard, has shut off, some water retention areas or something of the sort, right? And
Okay.
now the whole block might have 2-3 inches of water, in their
Oh, okay.
basement from water backup, right? Because those city pipes are shooting water back into clients' homes, and then it kind of levels out. So now you have multiple homes on a block without water coverage because they never had it and they just thought it was covered, and then they have a big claim out of pocket expense on their insurance record, if you will.
So if you don't mind me cutting in right quick, so for situations like this, would you recommend that one, the buyer checks with the agent, right?
Mm-hmm.
And and I'm just going to say this: it is always advisable, right,
Mm-hmm.
to pick a local agent, an agent that knows the local homes, just like Brent stated. If
Yeah.
that agent doesn't know much about Cook County, that agent cannot provide additional information. So going back to my question, will it make sense to check with your agent to make sure there are issues like this in that area, and to it even makes sense to have flood insurance or flood coverage on top of your standard policy?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, if I was a home buyer, right, since I'm like very involved in the home buying process,
Hmm.
Patrick, I would recommend talking to your real estate agent. I would recommend talking to, an insurance agent in the area that
Okay.
either one knows the risk and what we're looking at as far as the home goes, what the prior claims are,
Okay.
what kind of happened at the property. Did it have a fire? That kind of thing, not just in terms of water, but really in terms of what's gone down here. Because we really don't know what has happened to the property. Yeah, it might be rehabbed in 2022, but it could have been because there was a fire in there, water coverages, you know,
Hmm.
um, and claims to, rebuild that property.
So it's actually interesting you stated that, right? So as an agent, and I've also worked with other agents, there has only been one situation where uh, an attorney actually did ask all these questions. Some of the attorneys do not ask those questions, right?
Wow.
So for an agent who also does not know, how can they verify all this information? And no pun intended, or I'm not trying to accuse anybody, but some sellers can tell you they have no knowledge of that, right?
Yeah.
So after
No.
purchasing it, you end up finding out that even you might not be able to file a claim because there's been claims filed against that property numerous times by previous owner. And correct me if I'm wrong. From my understanding, the if I own a home and I file claims, the claims stay with the home. The claim does not stay with me when I even sell the house, right? So how can I verify that claims and even what specific claims were filed uh, on those on a specific how do we call it, property?
Yeah, so a common misconception here, Patrick. Technically, claims do file the person who filed it.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yes. So, and the house does.
Okay.
So it's kind of a double-edged
I
sword
see.
there, right? Because
Okay.
the seller of the property is selling
Hmm.
their home. Let's say they're upgrading, getting into their dream home out of their starter home, right?
Hmm.
And they're going to buy that new property and they have a claim on their previous policy. This could
Yes.
lead to it affecting their new insurance price
Ah, I
at the
see.
new property because now it's based off of their insurance score, credit rating, all that fun stuff.
Interesting. Okay. I didn't know
Yeah.
that. Okay.
Yeah. As well as the buyer too, right? Because that home's
Right.
had a claim on it. And it's seen as a property that has a higher probability of having a
Okay.
claim now. depending on what
I
it
see.
is, right? But yeah, that's a common misconception too.
Okay. Okay. It's and thank you for that clarification, because my knowledge on that was limited, and I guess this was information that when I read to, I got another agent to confirm that. So thank you for that. Now let's and I guess with challenges, right? It usually also comes with with pain and cost associated with this. So I would like to know, do you have examples of situations where lack of property coverage led to significant out-of-pocket cost for
Ye-
individuals?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's not like we've seen on like my end of like where I've had clients, that I've
Okay,
talked to and they've been like, "Oh no, I don't want that." And now they have a situation where they do have it, because most oftentimes it's rather playing it safe than sorry at the end of
sure.
the day with
Okay,
water coverages, right? Your
okay,
water backup. So, I mean, bare minimum water backup coverage on my end is about $5,000 in coverage. Like that is the starting point that we
yeah,
should start at, even though most water damages go up to 20K. I've seen a
I see.
lot of water claims go up to 20K, maybe well within that 15K range. Now, I've seen people not have enough there and have to come out $5,000, $10,000 out of pocket because they didn't see the need to increase it. I've seen people come from other companies that have told me about, my agent didn't tell me this, my agent didn't tell me that. And I mean, it really just takes a simple Google search nowadays with the Better Business Bureau, because it will tell you all of the
All right,
clients that never talked to their agent, and their agent didn't tell them what coverage they did and did not have. So then
right.
that's when you run into this problem of not knowing, and it's coming back to bite you, kind of thing,
Okay,
because you didn't want to spend the time.
okay. So I do have two questions
Yes.
based on what I've heard so far, and I guess I did ask one earlier. In terms of how can I look up? Is there a way to look up previous claims on a specific home? That's one.
Yep.
Secondly, and you may have answered this earlier when you were talking about flooding, and this is coming from personal experience, right?
Hmm.
Now, those of us that lives in colder areas like Chicago, right,
Hmm.
that we usually have harsh winters, the probability of you having your pipes bursting and flooding your home is higher. Which personally, I've had that happen to my investment property twice, right?
Hmm.
And so, I've gone through this process before. So, from what I'm hearing, will it make sense to add on flood insurance to your properties, especially if you live in places like Chicago? Because it could happen that you might not even be available that winter. You may be gone, and your heating system could be faulty, which that is what happened to my investment property, and the pipes could, freeze and burst. So does that fall into? I guess the question I'm trying to ask is, does that fall into the flooding category?
So no,
Okay.
actually. So
Okay.
if pipes freeze and burst, obviously, there's a couple things that go with that, right? So
Hmm.
sometimes if the heat, if you never turned on the heat, right? I know your
Hmm.
situation is the, furnace got faulty, stopped
Right.
working, right? That's
Right.
a different story than your heat simply not working, you being
Sure.
negligent about it, and that
Right.
pipe freezing, huge water claim.
Right.
Negligence, separate.
Okay.
Now, pipe bursting, sudden and accidental. So if it had happened, right? It happened in a day, happened in hours, maybe overnight,
Okay.
right?
Right.
That pipe froze, that pipe expanded and burst, right? So that would
All
be
right.
our sudden accidental coverage, which would then, cover up to the dwelling amount. So say the
Okay.
coverage on the property was 500K, as long as your policy includes that sudden and accidental for water up to 100%
Mm-hmm.
of the dwelling, you will have that 500K for
Okay.
that water damage.
Okay. Okay. Then to my previous question, is
Mhm.
there a way for an individual to verify whether a property has had claims filed on it by previous owners?
Clients, buyers, and real estate agents, no. I
Okay.
don't think there's a way that you can look it up unless someone finds it out. Comments below on on the podcast. But to
Okay.
my knowledge, I have access to that. Working with multiple carriers, it's called what we call a clue report on a
Okay.
property. So I'm able
Okay.
to look up a property, see what claim was filed, when it was filed, how much it was. Sometimes it lists a name there, next to who did file that claim, but obviously without their information, it's probably not going to pop up with their name. But
All
there
right.
is a way that an insurance agent like myself as a broker can. I
Okay.
can't speak for other agents, but it's a really good reason, for me to be really in tune with the
All
buying
right.
process and
Okay.
the real estate agent.
Okay. So which I guess what I'm trying to drive to is that it is also a responsibility of the buyer, right, to
Hmm.
make sure that the agent, the insurance agent, is able to at least pull that information up to verify, because the I've had situations, and not just me, other clients, it's like, I don't understand why my policy is so high for
Hmm.
this particular property. A prime example, I have a client that just closed on a house less than a month ago. She was paying way less in one area of the city, but a new home that she was purchasing, like the policy was double. And it's like, why is that? Right.
Hmm.
So, from what I'm hearing, it will probably make sense to check with the agent to pull up that information to at least have an idea of what is going on. Because if that is the situation, then my client has better, I guess, informed. If my client is informed on her next step and what she needs to do, whether
Hmm.
we have to even renegotiate, the price on their property. So I guess that's the direction that I was trying to take this.
Yeah.
But thank you so much for that, Brent. So, and I was going to ask about the cost, right? And I believe you've touched on it. So, with with everything that we are talking about, I guess one of the biggest challenge when it comes to home insurance is actually whether you need to add flood insurance or not.
Hmm.
Is that what I'm hearing?
So, I mean, I can look up flood zones on my end,
Okay.
right? So you have
Right.
your A zone, your AE zone, your X zone, your C zone, right?
Okay.
X and C are pretty much the same.
Okay.
AE is, required flood zone for a
Okay.
purchase, right? If you have a loan, you need to get flood insurance for that
Hmm.
property. And then A is a little bit different. And then there's a V flood zone too, right? So they're all
Okay.
different determinations, having to do like with mud flow, rising water, things like that. But when you're a new home buyer, honestly, I would personally, and this is not just because I'm biased, because I'm an insurance agent, I would personally get flood insurance for your first year. First
Okay.
year in the home, you don't know the area. Maybe you talk to the neighbors as the real estate agent and buyer of the new home, and you got a pretty good gist of how the water flows around in the streets. What does it look like the last 10 years?
Okay.
And you can kind of get a good guess of what's going to happen. But the next year, you could have a flood. You could have a
Sure.
flood, and it could be
All right.
that year that you have that flood. So see what the water levels look like, see what the harsh weather in Illinois, Chicagoland area looks like.
Yeah.
Purchase the flood for the first year. You don't want
Okay.
it the second year, I'd get rid of it, but
Okay.
it's up to the buyer for sure.
Okay. Okay. That was great.